Hi and welcome back to WeAreNeo. Today I want to explain to you how I came up with my channel name WeAreNeo, what it means to me and what all of this has to do with the movie The Matrix. And most importantly, how we can finally free ourselves from the Matrix. I made a lot of effort for this video and wrote down some notes because otherwise it would be impossible to remember all of this. So please forgive me if I keep looking at my phone. I just want to get my main message straight to the point. As most of you have probably already realized yourself, my intro is a direct reference to the movie The Matrix from 1999. The Matrix has always been my absolute favorite movie, from the cinematic side, like the camera work, to the spectacular special effects. Most movies today can't hardly keep up with that, although the movie is already 20 years old. On the other hand, because of the captivating story and the profound dialogues. In my opinion, the movie contains a hidden message which most people unfortunately don't really understand. The whole Matrix Trilogy is more or less an allegory, which means on the surface level they are well done science fiction blockbusters, but have a deeper meaning when you look at them closer. Even I didn't get the hidden message for years, although I had watched the movies countless times. Only after the interpretation, the Matrix Trilogy Decoded from Passio, which I will link here and in the description below, it clicked for me. Which, by the way, was the inspiration for my channel name. At this point I have to give a spoiler warning, because I will reveal some scenes from the movie. So if you have never seen the movie before, you better watch it first to understand the content of my video. I think the whole trilogy is available on Netflix. My recommendation would be: first watch all the 3 movies, then the interpretation, then my video, and then all 3 movies again to really understand it. The first movie answers the question, what is the Matrix? Because in order to free yourself from the Matrix, you must first recognize what it actually is. The second movie answers the question, why are we in the Matrix? And the third movie, how do we get out of the Matrix? But I only want to concentrate on the first movie here, because otherwise it would exceed the scope of the video and is simply the better movie. If you're really interested, be sure to check out the whole interpretation. It's all explained there in much more detail. I personally have always found the movie very appealing because I see many parallels to my own life in it. The main character in the movie is called Neo. At the beginning of every movie you see Neo sleeping. On his computer screen it says, "Wake up, Neo." This is of course meant metaphorically. In Latin, Neo means new. My last name happens to be Neumann, meaning new man in English, which is funnily enough also mentioned in the interpretation as the next stage of human evolution, so to speak, the new enlightened man. Furthermore, the neocortex is the most highly developed part of our brain, which is also responsible for our consciousness and independent thinking. We can only reach higher consciousness if our left brain hemisphere, the logical thinking, and our right brain hemisphere, the emotional thinking, work together, thus become one. Neo also is an anagram for one, meaning the one, as he is also called later in the movie. So you could also interpret my channel name as We Are One. In the beginning, Neo works as a software developer in a big office building, just like I did back then. I used to work as a computer game developer and was also a programmer, so I can relate to Neo quite well. His boss tells him, "You have a problem with authority." Which was also my problem too, when other people wanted to tell me what to do or how to think. I already had a hard time in school with that and always resisted it. Not because I was stupid, but because I already knew then that they would never need most of it later on. In his private life, Neo is a computer hacker in the search of truth. Just like I did when I stopped watching TV at the age of 16 and started to look for the truth on the internet myself, almost for half of my life now. I was also a computer nerd and sometimes felt like a hacker myself, especially when the internet was relatively new. And I also kept going down the rabbit hole and was searching for answers for years. But I don't even want to go in all to the negative things you can find there. Everyone has to find that out for himself, and there are already enough YouTube channels that focus just on that. With my channel, I want to offer a solution for all the people who have already woken up, whatever that means to you. Let's continue in the movie. Neo meets Trinity, the main female character of the story. Apart from the Christian interpretation of this word, in the spiritual world, Trinity means the interaction between mind, body and heart, or soul. Only if we bring these three parts in harmony, we can unfold our true power. Trinity leads Neo to Morpheus. Morpheus is the god of dreams in Greek mythology and son of the god of sleep. He is the one who wants to awake Neo from his dream and show him the truth. In the movie, Trinity represents the soul, Neo the will, and Morpheus the mind. Together they form the three pillars of our human consciousness, our emotions, our thoughts, and our actions. Morpheus explains the Matrix to Neo, quote, "The Matrix is everywhere. It's all around us, even now in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth." The examples Morpheus gives here are pretty clear, because why of all things does he mention television, work, church and taxes? The four most important control mechanisms of our society today. Since the movie is actually only about a virtual reality, he might as well have said, when you go for a walk, or when you are in the nature. Strangely enough, nature is not mentioned once in the whole movie, probably because it's the exact opposite of the Matrix. Neo asks further, "What truth?" Morpheus answers, "That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you have been born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind." And the same can be applied to our current world, because we are born into a kind of slavery, even if most people don't even notice it. As soon as we are born into this world, we are immediately in debt, because we have no place to live, because we have to buy it with money, which we first have to work hard for. Just like I bought back this small piece of nature that should not belong to anybody in the first place. Nature belongs to all of us. For this we then have to pay taxes every year if we want to or not, because if we don't, we are threatened with violence from the government. Let's have a closer look at that word, government. It's made up out of two words. Govern, in Latin guberno, which means control, and ment, in Latin mente, in English mind. Put together it means mind control. For this purpose the state uses television, the media and the school system, where we are told from our childhood that this is all perfectly normal. The longer we are exposed to this kind of mind control, the harder it becomes to free ourselves from it, which is also mentioned later in the movie. Quote from Morpheus, "We never free a mind once it reached a certain age. It's dangerous. The mind has trouble letting go." And this is unfortunately often the problem, that many people do not even want to know the truth out of pure self-protection and because their ego has attached itself to this narrative for years, like a belief. That's why it's not enough to just show someone the truth. They have to see it for themselves and discover it through their own research. Morpheus says, You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. I used to feel the same way, and it drove me crazy, almost depressive. Then comes probably the most iconic scene in the whole movie. Morpheus offers Neo 2 pills. The blue pill represents the ignorance, and the red pill represents the truth. Meanwhile, the term taking the red pill has already become established in the English language, which means as much as swallowing the unpleasant truth and waking up from the world of illusion. Neo decides to take the red pill, which wakes him up in the real world in a horror scenario, where he is rescued by Morpheus' spaceship. Likewise, I was practically rescued by a ship from the Matrix as well, when I bought a sailboat in Colombia, with which my escape from the system began 2.5 years ago. Living in a boat actually feels like living on a parallel world. From the shore, people only see a few sailboats and don't think much of it. Before, I didn't even know that there are people living in such boats for years, fully equipped with modern technology, sometimes even whole families with children or dogs. But from the boat, you can see all the people running around in the Matrix like ants, without even noticing you. On board there are actually no more laws. You're completely free and you can do whatever you want. You're completely detached from the rest of the world and don't really notice much of it anymore. It was definitely a crazy experience, and I kept thinking about the movie, and sometimes I felt like I was on board of the spaceship. After Neo has rehabilitated, Morpheus shows him what the Matrix really is. He actually answers the question himself, quote, "What is the Matrix? Control. The Matrix is a computer-generated dream world built to keep us under control in order to change a human being into this." Morpheus shows a battery, because in the movie people are the power source for the machines. Transferred to our world, we are the energy source for the system, because only if we all play along can the system continue to function. And that's why the state tries to keep us under control with different methods. Morpheus says, as long as the Matrix exists, the human race will never be free. This means, as long as we let ourselves be controlled, we will never be free. This is where I see the biggest problem today, that many people simply accept being controlled by others, or even worse, want to control others. Everything for security, of course. Next comes the legendary fight scene between Morpheus and Neo. Morpheus says, "I'm trying to free your mind, Neo, but I can only show you the door. You are the one who has to walk through it. Which means that you can only free yourself." Then Neo is supposed to jump from one skyscraper to another, and Morpheus says, "You have to let it all go, Neo. Fear, doubt and disbelief. Free your mind." And then he jumps to the other side very easily. In English this is also called the leap of faith, which means that if you believe in something strong enough and put all your fears and doubts aside, you can achieve anything. Then Morpheus walks through a city full of people and explains, "The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. When you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. At the same time, you see all the people in black suits, a nun and a policeman. All people who work for this control system." So the imagery further supports Morpheus' statement. He continues, "But until we do, these people are still a part of the system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. And that is exactly why so many people also reject the truth, because they are completely dependent on the system. After all, that's also the goal of every government, to make people as dependent on themselves as possible, which makes them easier to control. That's why, for example, they never teach you at school how to become self-employed, or how to plant your own plants, or how to build a house. Unfortunately, most of us have already forgotten those skills, including me. And for this reason, I want to learn all of this again, so that I can pass on this valuable knowledge to my future children, so that they are independent and self-sufficient. After all, that is really all we need: a roof over our heads and something to eat. In the past, this knowledge was passed on from generation to generation, and people lived in small communities where they support each other. Nowadays, unfortunately, young people are increasingly drawn to the big cities for better jobs and activities. I have lived in Munich for the last 5 years myself, although I was originally raised in a small village. But just like me back then, most people in my age are living only on rent and are therefore completely dependent on their job or the welfare state. And in order to afford their standard of living, people work themselves to death and get sick, which in turn makes them dependent on the health insurance system, an endless vicious cycle. For example, I used to be constantly ill in Germany because of my work simply destroyed me. Too much stress, too much pressure to perform, bad nutrition, annoying city noise, bad air, and hardly any sunshine. No wonder. Since I emigrated, I haven't been really sick, which by the way was also one of my main reasons for leaving Germany: my health. And I no longer have any health insurance. For what? Here I have no more stress, a healthy diet because I have much more time to cook by myself and eat a lot of fruits. I have a lot of sunshine, always fresh air from the ocean, and beautiful nature around me. Therefore, the more independent we make ourselves from the system or government, the freer we become. And that is also the goal for my channel, to show you how to become as independent as possible. Then there's an interesting scene in the movie with the character Cypher, who is secretly meeting with an agent of the system. Cypher is an ancient word for zero, and therefore the opposite of Neo, the one. Cypher says, ignorance is bliss. He would rather live in a fictional world and be rich and famous than have to deal with the harsh reality. In exchange, he even wants to betray his friend Morpheus to the system. And I can even understand him very well, because that is the problem with the truth. Once you have realized it, there's actually no turning back. That's what Morpheus explicitly warned Neo about before he offered him the red pill, meaning the truth. I used to wonder why I had to look into all of this. And sometimes I wished I could forget everything so that I could participate in the normal society. Because this doesn't make your life within the system any easier, because everybody thinks you are crazy. In the end, I lost many friendships and even 2 good relationships. But at some point I just couldn't stand it any longer to live in this sick society, and I had to pull the emergency brake and left everything behind. Even though it was probably the hardest decision of my life, in retrospect it was the best. That's why I can understand quite well if you don't want to deal with the unpleasant truth while you are still part of the system yourself. On the other hand, it also gave me the strength to take the step at all, as I had no other choice. Another important scene that I definitely want to mention is the scene with the little boy who can bend spoons with his mind. The boy says to Neo, "Do not try and bend the spoon, that's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth." Neo asks, "What truth?" The boy, "There is no spoon." This means that if we want to change something in a system, we must not try to change the system, because the system doesn't really exist, or only in our thoughts, because we believe in it. Instead, we must first look inside and change ourselves. Only then we can achieve a change on the outside. I also find it interesting that the boy looks like a little monk, and although he is still so young, he seems to be wiser than Neo. Often our children are smarter than we think, because they haven't been brainwashed yet and can imagine things that seem impossible for us adults. We only have to listen carefully, then we can learn a lot from our children. Now I'm slowly coming to the end of the movie. Neo is the first person to successfully fight off an agent of the system. So he has already gained higher powers, but in the end it all leads to nothing because the agent is directly replaced by a new one. As a result, Neo tries to run away from the agents and runs into a trap. He's shot by the agent, but only in the virtual world. This scene is very symbolic. Neo first has to die in the world of illusion so that he can be reborn afterwards through an act of true love, that is, through a kiss of Trinity. And when Neo comes back to life and the agent shoots at him again, he just says one single word: no. The most powerful word in our universe, which everyone understands no matter what language they speak. That means only if we learn to say no to the control system, we will be free. Neo can now stop the bullets with his mind. In other words, he can do something that seems impossible. He was reborn, so to speak, as the new man, the new enlightened man of whom I spoken at the beginning. He can now see the Matrix for what it really is, symbolically represented by the Matrix code. This means that when we reach a higher level of consciousness, we don't have to use force to free ourselves from the system. We simply turn away from it by saying no. Once again, there's a parallel to my own life. When I came to Costa Rica almost 2 years ago, I already had a pretty strong mindset because the sailing trip had really made me tough. But I still had my doubts whether my plan would work out at all. I had no idea how I was going to manage everything, all alone in a foreign country and without speaking their language. Did I even have enough money? What will I do when my visa expires? Am I even allowed to legally buy a piece of land here? The typical German fear thinking. I also had to be reborn first to get rid of these last doubts. This happened to me, however, when I took part in an ayahuasca ceremony in the mountains of Costa Rica. Although I did not die physically, my mind and my ego did. This can be very unpleasant at first, and the longer you hold on to your ego, the worse it gets. But as soon as you let go of it and just accept it, it is the most beautiful feeling on earth. You just feel the pure energy, euphoria and love flowing right through you. In this state of mind, there are no more problems anymore, and you feel invincible. All thought patterns and beliefs that you had acquired over the years are suddenly gone. Everything is new. It actually felt if you were reborn as a new person. Of course, this state only lasts for a few hours, but a little bit seems to have stuck anyway. Because since this spiritual experience, all my doubts, fears and worries are completely gone. I'm no longer afraid of death, because I know that death is not the end. But that doesn't mean that I want to die or that I put myself at unnecessary risk. Quite the opposite. I love my new life and I'm very grateful that I can experience all of this. And I also want to bring a couple of children into the world. But life is just much more easygoing when you are no longer afraid of anything. This may sound kind of crazy, especially for those who have never been involved with such things before. But unfortunately, this is very difficult to put into words. You can only feel it yourself. Sometimes it feels like my real life has only really begun since that day. The first 30 years were just the preparation for it. So in that sense, I'm only 1 year old. But I don't want to say that I'm enlightened, whatever that means. It was just the last remaining key I needed, like Neo in the movie. At the end of the movie, Neo is standing in a phone booth and speaks through the phone to the system. I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. By this he means the people who control the system. Then the screen displays the words system failure. He continues, I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how it's going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone. And then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without any rules, controls, without borders or boundaries. a world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you. So he wants to show us a world without the government, and that it is up to us how our future will look like. And this brings us to the core message of the whole movie. What is the Matrix? A control system in which we are all born into and which we call government. If you want to watch the movie again, just replace the word Matrix with the word government for fun, and the whole movie will get a new meaning. The second movie, Matrix Reloaded, goes even more into detail and looks for the cause. Why are we in the Matrix? Why our governments exist, and how did we get into this situation in the first place? Only when we find the cause, we can find a solution. Because the problem is not the government itself, but rather the belief in the government, or the belief in control. Because the Matrix is actually only an illusion, just like the government. Only by believing in it do we give it all its power. Why do we allow ourselves to be ruled or controlled by politicians, or believe in some laws written in some books? Basically, this is nothing more than a religion. And just like with strong religious people, it is almost impossible to change their beliefs. Many people even like to give up their responsibilities by ticking a little box every 4 years, hoping that the next political party will save all their problems for them. Of course, this is much easier than taking full responsibility for your own life. Unfortunately, this is also the problem even with the more woke people. They all try to fight the system within the system by getting politically involved or protesting, which only reinforces the division of the people. But that would be the same if Neo was trying to fight the Matrix within the Matrix, without recognizing it for what it really is, an illusion. Sadly, most people only know two alternatives to democracy: the monarchy and the dictatorship. So they prefer to choose the lesser evil. But ultimately, all three are just different forms of government, where the people are controlled by a few. So none of these systems can ever lead to the freedom of humanity, because they are all based on control and suppression. Therefore, the only thing that remains is anarchy. The word anarchy originally comes from the Greek word anarchos, which means without ruler. Unfortunately, this word is often translated wrongly as without rules, and therefore most people wrongly associate anarchy with chaos. However, anarchy actually only means the absence of government, so basically the opposite of hierarchy. Everybody's equal, so to speak, and nobody has the right to rule over anybody else. That sounds very nice at first. Unfortunately, anarchism is not clearly defined, and there are many different types of anarchism. On one hand, there's anarcho-socialism or anarcho-communism, which in my opinion are both paradox in themselves. Because in order to share the means of production equally, a form of control is needed. In other words, a form of government. On the other hand, there is anarcho-capitalism, which in my opinion is the only logical form of anarchy. Capitalism originally means nothing more than a free market that regulates itself through supply and demand. As long as everything is based on voluntarism, there can be hierarchical structures, which is inevitable in a modern society. You can already see that this whole topic gets pretty complicated. So I can only recommend to everybody to research everything I say here for themselves. One of the most well-known anarcho-capitalists is Jeff Berwick, also known as the Dollar Vigilante. I will link here to one of my favorite speeches by him, which is also about our freedom and how we can best achieve it through our own actions. In his YouTube channel, you can find much more information about this topic. Unfortunately, the terms anarchism and capitalism both have a rather bad reputation nowadays, which is probably intentional, since they are the ultimate enemies of any form of government. But nowadays we don't really have any real capitalism in the sense of a free market anymore. Rather a state capitalism. This means that the government is involved in everything through regulations, laws and lobbying, which is why it doesn't work. Luckily there's a better term called Libertarianism, which I think can be better defined. I would also call myself a libertarian. The term comes from the Latin word libertas, which means freedom. Basically, libertarianism is based on two very simple principles. The non-aggression principle, which states that no one should have the right to exercise violence over others, and the principle of self-ownership, which states that every human being is the sole owner of his own body and therefore the only one who can decide over himself without any restrictions. Or even the golden rule, an ethical principle that can be found in almost every religion. Treat others as you want to be treated by them. In even simpler terms, you could also say you can do whatever you want as long as you don't harm other people, animals, or the nature. This includes both the bodily integrity as well as the private property of each person, which should actually be self-evident. If every human being would follow this basic law of nature, we would probably have no more problems in the world. But that's where I see the big double standard of any government. While the citizens are not allowed to rob anyone or use violence, the government does just that when it takes taxes from us through its monopoly of violence, or when it puts us in prison for victimless crimes, or even takes part in wars that are against international law. Many of you will probably ask yourself, but how can our world function without the government? Who will build our roads? And who will protect us from crime? The answer is actually quite simple, and it's called Privatrechtsordnung in German, which means private law order, but I couldn't find a fitting translation for it in English. Basically, it means that all the services provided to us by the government can also be provided by a private company. Most of the time even much better, since fair competition forces a company to constantly improve their services and keep their prices low. You can see this quite clearly if you compare a state-owned company with a private-owned company. For example, in Germany, we have to pay for the state-owned media service called GEZ. Compared to Netflix, Netflix offers much better service for half of the price. But the most important difference is the freedom of choice. If you don't like the service anymore, you can change it at any time or just cancel it. But you don't have this choice with the government. You're basically forced to pay, otherwise you're threatened with violence again. In addition, a private company is liable for its mistakes and can lose customers if its services are bad. So customer satisfaction is quite important to it. The government couldn't care less, because its mistakes are always paid for by the citizens in the form of higher taxes. It also has no interest whatsoever in ever lowering the taxes again, even if they keep promising to do so in order to fool their voters. Of course, this topic is much more complex. I just wanted to give a simple example here. If you're interested in how such a private law order could look like in reality, I can recommend the book Sicher ohne Staat by the German journalist Oliver Janich, which is also available as a Kindle version in English with the name Order of Freedom, which I will link below. This bestseller describes in detail, based on concrete examples, how a private legal system can function without the monopoly of violence. This book really opened my eyes, as I could not really imagine many of these concepts myself at the beginning. But also in libertarianism, there are many different views. The biggest problem, which I still see in it, for example, if I buy a piece of land with an ocean view and my neighbor suddenly decides to build a skyscraper right next to it, or a nightclub where loud music is played all night long, then he actually does not directly violate the law of nature, because he does not cause any direct harm to me. Nevertheless, this could become chaotic relatively quickly if everyone is allowed to do whatever they want on their property. In my opinion, there have to be a few simple rules to ensure a peaceful living together in a community. Therefore, some libertarians propose a night watchman state, meaning a minimal state, which should only take over the most necessary tasks, such as the protection of the freedom and property of its citizens. But this would require a kind of control system again, which is why I don't think it makes much sense. In my opinion, the best solution would be to divide the countries in small communities, or at most entire cities. These would then be run like private companies meaning that you sign a contract and pay a membership fee, and in return you would receive appropriate services such as safety and the maintenance of roads and infrastructure. Something similar already exists in some countries, for example here in Costa Rica, and it's called gated communities. I myself have lived in such a community close to here. These communities are mostly fenced in and guarded by private security guards. The members pay a monthly fee and are allowed to use all public facilities within the community, for example a pool, a fitness center or some park areas. But they also have to follow certain rules within the community. If they don't, an arbitral tribunal can be called, and in the worst case they can be kicked out. The same could work for entire villages or cities. The main advantage over governments is that you can leave or change these communities at any time if you don't like the rules anymore or the membership fee is too high. Just like a private service provider. So you have the free choice. And I think this way the people who fit together best and have similar views would find each other. This would probably also lead to many new concepts of living together in communities, and you would see which of them would succeed best. A very interesting project which goes exactly in this direction is called Free Private Cities, and it was brought to life by the German entrepreneur Titus Gebel. He wants to build a completely new city which he will then run like a business. The annual fee should be only $1,000, for which the infrastructure and security will be guaranteed. Since you have to sign a contract with certain rules when you enter voluntarily, the company, in other words the city, is also liable if it does not deliver on its promises. As a result, the company also has a greater incentive to satisfy its citizens. Apparently he is already working on turning this mammoth project into reality on an island in Honduras. I have linked a nice interview with him here in which he explains his concept very well. If this great idea becomes a success, it could be a perfect example for other investors to build more cities like this. Something similar already exists in the form of city-states, as for example Monaco or Singapore. From the wealth of these cities, it is quite obvious that this concept works very well, which is probably also because they are both considered as tax havens. However, I'm absolutely not a fan of big cities, and I'm not saying that this is what our future should look like. I much prefer to live in harmony with nature, but to each his own, and that is the principle of individual freedom, that everyone can live where and however he wants. And I don't want to say that I have all the wisdom or know exactly the perfect solution. The only way to find out is to try it ourselves. And that's exactly what Neo says in the end of the first movie. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how it's going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. That means I only want to show you that many solutions already exist. Now it's up to us to put them into practice. But one question is still open, and that is, if Neo is the chosen one in the movie, who is the chosen one in our world? Can you figure it out? The answer is you. You are the chosen one. More precisely, we are all the chosen one. Every single one of us. That's why my channel is called WeAreNeo and not I am Neo. Because Neo is only the one because he believes in himself. In the same way that I truly believe in myself and in my plan, no matter what. And if I can do it, so can you. You just need to free your mind, put your fears aside and start saying no. No to the system of control. No to the government, because it's all an illusion. But as long as we believe in this illusion, nothing will change. And there will be no chosen one to save us all. We can only save ourselves by finally starting to wake up and realizing the truth. Wake up. With exactly these words the first movie ends. Because after Neo hangs up the phone, the song Wake Up from Rage Against the Machine starts playing, in which the singer screams out loud several times, "Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!" So, That was a pretty long video, but it was just really important to me to explain to you why I'm doing all of this. I would really like to know what you think about it. Do you feel the same way, or do you think I'm completely crazy now? Please tell me in the comments, and be completely honest, I can handle criticism very well. If you liked it, please leave me a like and share this video with your friends. Also, you can subscribe my channel for free in order to don't miss any videos from me in the future. My next episode will be a normal one again, where I lay down the power and water lines through my whole property. And here you can watch my last episode again, where I lift my container onto the concrete feet and talk about my learnings. Until next time, WeAreNeo.